All right, guys. Well, good morning. Thanks for coming today. Today we're going to be talking about designing signs for code compliance. We've had a little bit of a struggle with signs over the past several years and trying to get those sign drawings when they're submitted in applications to meet code. It's been out for many years on what the design requirements are, but it's something that quite honestly gets overlooked pretty much all the time. So today I want to kind of break down those walls and kind of help everybody get a better understanding of what is required for signs when you're applying for a building permit. So a couple of logistics for those who are attending online. All of our online attendees will be muted during the presentation. If you do want to ask a question in person, just please raise your hand, speak up. And if you're online, you can just click on the Q&A and you can go ahead and just type in whatever questions you have, and we'll be monitoring that, and they'll forward those questions to me, and then I'll try to respond to those if you have them. So as you can see, we're going to talk about a few things. Signs. There's a couple code requirements here. One is the city development code. That is basically the city code. It dictates what all the planning and zoning information is as far as size, restrictions, locations, limitations, what needs a permit, what doesn't need a permit, and so on. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to go over all the different types of signs that do require a permit. So it kind of tried really hard to break down the mystery of the development code into simple English and pictures so that it's pretty easy to understand. Then we're going to go into the building code requirements. So the building code is the building code. It's the international building code is what we use. And we're going to go into that as far as what is required in the building code. And we're going to talk about the structural design criteria, and we're going to go over a couple of examples. You know, the two most common ones that we see here are a monument sign or an entrance sign, so basically a ground mounted sign, and then a wall sign of various types, whether it's a channel or raceway or just letters on the building. So I'm going to kind of go over some of the most common ones of each and kind of go over what exactly is required in those. And that's the biggest thing that we want to try to emphasize today, is those connection details and what's required for those. So the development code, what is it? So basically the development code, like I said, it's the local code for the city of Sandy Springs. It's basically all the planning and zoning regulations. They dictate the size, location, etc. The development code has a lot more things in it as far as what tells you what you're allowed to build on your property, where you're zoned, what your setbacks are, and things like that. And then it was just intended to be a guide, you know, for the future growth of the city. There's a master plan that we have. It's called the Next 10. And everything in that is based on the future growth of the city. So that's why we have it. Otherwise, it's the Wild West. You see big old Las Vegas signs everywhere next to our neighborhood, and that probably wouldn't go over too well. Specifically, signs are covered in Division 8.3 under Article 8 of the Development Code. So there are basically 9 different types of signs that we have. Awning signs, canopy signs, crown signs, monument signs, projection signs, and so on and so forth. But just to be real clear about it, I mean, kind of put the numbers with the picture. So an awning sign is literally just that. It's a sign on it. Canopy sign is a fixed canopy, and you put the letters on top of that. And then you have crown signs, which are like the big signs you see on buildings. And then you have monument signs, usually for commercial, and then different types of projection, shingle signs. Wall signs is very common. So these are the two here. Maybe this one, these two are very similar, but these are the two that we see most, along with temporary signs. So we'll kind of talk about each of those. So in the development code, we have a table here that basically shows you where certain signs are allowed. These are the 9 different signs that we have over here. And these are the different neighborhoods as far as zoning. You have protected neighborhoods, that's your traditional neighborhoods, what's allowed and what's not allowed. Urban neighborhoods would kind of be like say some townhouses kind of along Roswell Road or something like that. So these are basically your neighborhoods. And then corridors, nodes, that's basically all your commercial zones. This is where you guys are probably putting your signs most of the time. So this is like up and down Roswell Road. And then perimeter center is specifically that, all the area on the other side of 400, that where Perimeter Mall is, and the King and Queen building, and all the hospitals and all that. That's all Sandy Springs, and we have the different zonings over there. So this chart will tell you where certain signs are allowed to be installed. So let's break it down. So awning signs. So what is an awning sign? It's exactly what it sounds like. It's a sign where the graphics are on the awning itself. All right. So general provisions for that, only awnings over ground story doors or windows are allowed when you put the sign on it. An awning sign may be placed in the face, the balance of the awning, but must not exceed outside of the awning, meaning the sign cannot extend past the awning itself. Awning signs cannot be eliminated. They are just the awning itself. So some of them, this is kind of the meat and potatoes of what you guys really important to you guys is the size restrictions. So a lot of these have similar size restrictions, so you'll kind of see it over and over again. But this is the easiest way that we can kind of break it down for you guys so that it would make sense. So the building facade that you lease. So if you lease from this corner to the edge of the screen, that's your spot. If that is less than 32 feet, then you're allowed a combined sign area of up to 32 square feet. All right. If it is bigger, if your building facade for your space is say 50 feet, you're allowed a combined sign area of 1 square foot per linear foot. So if you got 50 linear feet, you can put a 50 square foot sign. All right, on the primary facade. If you're on a corner or a side, then you can have on the side of your building, because you're allowed multiple signs, then it's half of that. So if you have 50 feet on the other side, maybe like it's like a restaurant, then you're allowed 25 square feet on that side. Canopy size. Very similar to awning signs, except these are the letters that are on top of a fixed canopy. The canopy is part of the building, part of the structure, and you want to put letters on top of that. So very similar. The general provisions are basic canopy sign may extend above or below the canopy, however, it must not extend outside the overall length, just like the awning sign. Only canopies over the ground story doors may contain sign, again, just like the awning sign. But you're only allowed a maximum of 1 sign per canopy. But the canopy sign may be externally and internally illuminated. So you can light up a canopy sign. What are the size restrictions? It's the same thing. On your main facade, if it's less 32 feet, you're allowed up to 32 feet. If you're more, then it's 1 to 1. And on the side, it's a half to 1. So same rules for that. Ground signs. We don't see too many of these, but we do have several tall buildings and new buildings being built. So basically, it's a sign that's attached to the upper portion of the building that is 4 stories in height. We have larger buildings like the King and Queen, for example. Those are called high visibility facades. Those are buildings that are at least 10 stories in height, and they're clearly visible from the highway. So 400 and 285. So, and they have to be adjacent to the highway. So when you meet that criteria, there's a few buildings. If you come up 285 near New North Side, there's a hotel there, and they have a big sign there. There's several hotels that have a similar thing, but that's basically what that is. So what is the crown sign at the general provisions? Well, for a crown sign, it's only allowed in buildings that are 4 stories in height. A crown sign must not be placed below the start of the 4th story, so it has to be high enough. The main reason for that is because we're allowing much larger signs, we don't want them low to the ground where everybody's going to see it right in their face. We're trying to keep things as unobtrusive as possible. It cannot extend above the roof line, so you can't have a marquee sign on top of the building. It can't cover the windows or the architectural details, so that's why you usually see at the top, because that's usually like a mechanical penthouse, and that's where they have things. Can't have more than two crown signs per building, and no more than 1 per facade is allowed. Wall signs, this is going to be a smaller sign that you may see down to the ground level. Those are allowed with a crown sign and kind of independent of each other, so you can have those concurrent with each other. And the crown sign can be lit. So the crown sign cannot exceed 180 square feet in general. And the other one is 360 square feet. So if you have a large building, so normally if this is a normal building, it's 180 square feet. But for high visibility facades, these are the 10 stories or more along the highway, you are allowed a bigger sign of 360 feet. Monument sign. So monument sign is basically a ground sign. So in simple terms, it's something that requires a foundation. It's sitting on the ground. It's independently supported. It must be located within 100 feet for a street, and it must have the address on it. It must be set back at least 5 feet from the front line and 10 feet from the common lot line. So this is basically what you see when you're driving down the street to identify it. The base must be constructed of durable materials because this is sitting on the ground. You can't have something that's going to rot or erode because of Mother Nature. So if you try to make a sign out of wood, it better be pressure treated or cedar or something like that so that it doesn't deteriorate. Stucco or ephes is not allowed. You have to keep that above. So this sign right here is probably a stucco sign. So you have to make sure, especially if ephes is exterior insulation finish system, that is just styrofoam. All right, and it will soak up water, and there's lath on it, and it'll start rusting everything out. So that's why you have to keep any type of porous materials has to be above ground, typically at least 8 inches. And these signs also can be lit up. So you allow one sign per 500 feet of frontage. You can have multiple signs, but they have to be at least 500 feet apart. The max sign area depends on how big the frontage is. Again, like 500 square feet of frontage, then it's 32 square feet. Go up to 1,000, it's 48, and over 1,000 is 64 square feet. So depending on how big your building is, that'll determine kind of how much, how large your sign can be. Projection signs. Projection signs are basically signs that stick out from the wall perpendicular. They're fixed, they don't move, they don't swing or anything. They have metal, typically metal or some sort of steel bracket that catches through the wall, and the sign is attached to that. It must be at least 20 feet from any other shingle sign or projection sign. It could be erected on a corner. There are some rules on corners, which we'll cover in a few minutes. It can't be any place any higher than 24 feet above the sidewalk, measured from the highest point of the sign to the top of the sidewalk below. The top of the sign can't be any higher than the top of the building. For one-story buildings, the top of the sign can have a maximum of 2 feet height above the building. And again, that's just for one stories. And those signs can also be lit. Same rules apply for these. You know, if you have your storefront from edge to edge is 32 square feet or less, you're allowed up to 32 square feet. If you're larger, again, 1 to 1 on the main street and half to 1 on the side. Shingle signs, don't see too many of those. You see them more in the historic districts, like up in Boston. They are very popular back in the day. They're very similar to projection signs. They go out perpendicular. The main difference is they have a bracket at the top, and the sign hangs down from a chain or a rope or something like that, so it can swing back and forth. All right, but it's basically the same rules as a projection sign. The maximum sign area for projection sign, it cannot exceed 9 square feet in the area, and only 1 is allowed per ground floor tenant space. Wall signs. This is what we see by far the most of, are wall signs. Different types. signs that are flush to the wall. We see a lot of raceways. We see channel letters, all kinds of things. But wall signs in general. So what exactly is a wall sign? Wall sign is just that. A sign that's attached to the wall of a building. And it does not project more than 1 foot from the outside of the wall. All right. So in general, very similar rules. The wall sign cannot be placed any more than 24 feet above the grade, the ground. And again, that's measured from the top to the bottom of the road or sidewalk. No portion of the sign may extend above the roof line or the parapet. A wall sign must not cover windows or details, and a wall sign can be lit up. Like everything else, very similar. Similar sizes. If you're less than, it's 32, and if you're greater than that, then it's 1-to-1 on the side on the primary and 0.5-to-1 on the sides. Entrance signs. Entrance signs are basically the same thing as a monument sign. The main difference is entrance signs are usually, like say, like for a neighborhood. It's a good example of an entrance sign. There's usually one sign on it, or a monument sign may have several signs on it. And again, it has to do with where they're allowed. These particular ones are allowed in residential areas, because typically you see it for like a neighborhood sign, entrance to a neighborhood. This one, like Northridge condominiums. So it's permanently fixed sign that is fully independent of the building for support, attached on its entire width to a continuous pedestal or wall that is used to identify entry to a development. It's got to be set back at least 10 feet from the right of way. The right of way is basically, it's technically from the center of the road X amount from the center line of the road. Say if you have a 50-foot right of way, your road might be 25 feet wide. That's 12.5 feet split each way on the road, and the difference is on that. So basically, it's in essence, it's outside where your utilities are, the power pole, the sidewalks, things like all of that is in the right of way. So you can't put your sign anywhere where that infrastructure is in place. So you have to be outside of that. And if you need help with locating that, you might can find that on your survey. GIS might be able to help us if we could find the original plat where it may show what the right of ways are, and then we can determine, roughly where that is. But in general, you can't put it in the right of way. It's got to be at least 10 feet back. It cannot encroach with the visibility, of the road, meaning they can't block your sight line when you turn in and out, and it can be lit. Same thing. The size of the individual sign is 32 square feet, like all the others. The structure, I believe, can be a little bit bigger. You're allowed 1 per entrance and 2 per property. The maximum height is 8 feet for this. Temporary signs, also called banner signs. All right. Banner signs are just that. They have to be supported on a building or on a fence or something like that. They have strings attached to the corners that you have to tie them off. That is a temporary sign. There are other types of temporary signs, but this is the most common that we have. So banner signs are allowed on new buildings that are 3 stories in height or greater and are not located in the protected neighborhood district. Protected neighborhood is your traditional neighborhoods. Banner is allowed 1 time for a period of up to and not to exceed 6 months. The banner must be affixed to the building, cannot exceed 120 square feet in total area, and the banner must be mounted so it does not extend above the line where the building, wall, and roof meet. So there are other types of banners. So this was banners on new buildings. So the main thing to note here on the new buildings is you're allowed a larger sign, 120 square feet for new buildings, because you're trying to advertise your new building, hey, coming soon or whatever. And you may not have your permanent sign yet. So we do allow a little bit larger sign. But for all of the signs, say you have like a gas station or something, or a little retail or subway or something like that, and then we put a temporary sign up, like grand opening, coming soon, or sale or something, then you are allowed that, but it's like all the others, a maximum of 32 square feet. It cannot encroach to the right of way. It has to be displayed on the same lot for a maximum of 3 2-week periods per calendar year. So there's a limitation on temporary signs and how long they can be posted. Yard signs. Yard signs, you see them as realtor signs or hey, my son's graduating or whatever. Those actually do not require a permit. You do not need a permit for those. However, there are rules for those, and you do have to follow those rules. Otherwise, code enforcement may come pay you a visit. So you are allowed up to 2 temporary signs per lot. The total temporary sign area is 6 square feet. So that's a 3 by 2. 1 sign or half of that for 2. The maximum height of the sign can't be any greater than 6 feet. And temporary signs cannot be illuminated. Sir. And you cannot put balloons on them either. That's right. You know, we see that a lot, you know. Yeah, you know, open house Saturday. Yeah, technically you can't put balloons on it. The reason why you can't put balloons on it is because these are always located by the street or in the right of way. And anytime, same reason why we don't allow flashing lights or reflective surfaces on it is because they're distracting to drivers as they go by. So it's a safety hazard. That's why we don't allow balloons and flashing lights on those types of signs. In other uses, see, this is for residential, for single family houses. So in a neighborhood in your house, you're allowed up to 6 square feet. For commercial use, you know, shopping centers, businesses, churches, etc., things like that, allows a larger sign. You can go up to 16 square feet. And there's no restriction on the number of temporary signs, provided the sign area when combined does not exceed the total 16 square feet. They can be used for a period of not to exceed 60 days on 2 separate occasions per year. So that'd be like a 30-day and a 30-day. You can potentially have additional postings, you know, but that would have to be allowed by the director on an as-needed basis. And that's depending on the circumstances. You know, maybe you own a building and a tenant moved out and you need to put another sign for these. So for something like probably allow you to, you know, keep a temporary sign up a little bit longer until at least that space gets rented out. Temporary signs cannot be eliminated. How do you measure signs? This is a biggie here. So how do you measure signs? The key thing for here is the sign area is calculated as the total area of the rectangle, circle or square, that fully encloses all the letters or images. So that 32 square feet that we're talking about is the total box around the sign, correct? So that would be a rectangle that we draw all the way around the entire perimeter. So whatever size rectangle, the smallest rectangle that you can fit around whatever geometry or shape profile that you do for that sign, that's your allowable area. Yep. All right. So this is for all wall signs, awning, canopy, and crown signs. Now, signs for background. So this is, you know, traditionally that you might have like a piece of plywood that you paint it and then you put your lettering on top of it. You know, a solid sign, not letters, not letter signs. Again, the area is the square footage of the entire background. All right. So it's not just the area of the letters, it's the area of the entire background. All right. The reason why is because that is considered part of the sign. Same thing for monument signs. The only difference for monument signs or ground mounted signs is the area of just the sign itself, not the structure that it stands on. So that's a little bit of a distinction for ground signs, you know, monument signs, projected signs. 3-dimensional signs. All right, this would be like you had, say, entrance sign to a neighborhood that was on a divided road or something like that. Or some people have like this, in this case, they may have a horse, you know, at a farm or something like that. And this is their, you know, their trademarks, you know, champion thoroughbred horse. It's based on the area of the largest side. Okay. That is what the size dimension is limited to. What about corners? We do have a lot of corner units, especially on in the perimeter center. There's several over there, and we actually do have a couple of corner signs. So a corner sign is calculated to add together the total area of office size. So again, you're allowed, in this case, I think it's 32 square feet per sign. And as long as it's greater than 60 degrees, which is pretty much always the case. If it's at an acute angle, it's really small angle, then you're going to consider it one sign. So you're not going to have the advantage of going to a larger sign. How do you measure the height of a sign? All right, so for monument signs, it's the total height of the monument sign measured from the top down to the ground, basically. So that's the development code. Kind of talk about what the restrictions are, the size restrictions, the location restrictions, things like that. Now we're going to go into the building code. The building code is the building code. That is what everybody has to design and follow when they're building anything new houses, new buildings, gazebos, pools, whatever. It's all part of the ICC with International Code covers building codes, particularly Chapter 8 or Section 8 of Appendix H for signs. So what is it? It is the building code. It's what's adopted by the state of Georgia. So if you do any state work, you have to follow it. And pretty much all the cities, all the major cities in the state of Georgia follow this as well. The current edition that the state uses and the city uses is 2018 edition. The sign code requirements are outlined in Appendix H in signs. And this has been in the building code for many, many versions of this, dating way back, like 3-4 versions ago. So all these signs provisions have been in there, they just haven't necessarily been enforced. But there's an important reason why they're enforced, and we'll talk about that. But they also specify the minimum design criteria and also the minimum support requirements. So what are the design criteria? This is something that gets overlooked probably 99% of the time. All right, there are structural design requirements. Just like when I designed this building we're in today or your house, you have to design your house to meet the exact same criteria here as your signs. Everything's got to be designed to meet these design codes. So a structural engineer will basically take these and mile per hour, and they'll convert it to a pressure, a PSF, a pound per square foot. And then they know that's what they have to design your sign for. I can tell you for all the signs, rarely are we worried about how much it weighs. I'm not worried about it coming down just because of gravity. I'm worried about it coming down because of the wind. All right. You see what we design it for. We design it for businesses, residential. This is 90% of it here is 105 mile an hour wind. This is reduced. It used to be higher in the previous code. So it got reduced down to 105. I don't know if anybody's ever stood out in 105 mile an hour wind, but you can't. It will blow you down the street. All right. A 45 mile an hour gust, you're having a hard time saying no. So we designed these for 105 mile an hour. And people ask, why is it 105 mile an hour? All right. It's because we have high wind events. We have thunderstorms. We have tornadoes. We're not designing for a tornado because our tornadoes double that wind speed. We can't design for it. We're not going to make people design for it. It's uneconomical. And but we do have hurricanes that do come through. We border Florida, and we've had hurricanes come straight through Atlanta. All right. And we have those winds 75, 85, 90 mile an hour. And that's what we're designing for. Can you imagine if we had one and we didn't design these signs for anything, they would go flying around everywhere. And the problem with those flying around everywhere is because they become large objects, missiles. They hit something, they go through a window, they go through a car, they go through a building, they can hurt people. So wind speed is based on risk categories. I kind of put in parentheses roughly what they are. There's a whole definition, but basically one is agricultural, 2 is business residential. This is the most common one. Public assembly, this would be like a stadium, something where you have a lot of people congregating, or a performing arts center like we have here. Those are designed for risk category 3, just because there's more people in there that can get hurt, essentially. That's what it is. And risk category 4 is all your rescue people, your fire, your police station. We have to make sure we design those to withstand those. And signs have to be designed, especially wall signs. Any sign that's attached to a building is required to be designed per whatever that risk category is in that building. So if you're designing a sign for the fire station, you have to design it for a risk category 4 or 117 mile an hour wind. All right. Seismic loads, I list them here, but honestly, here in Atlanta and Sandy Springs, seismic does not control. It's almost a wash with wind, but wind is usually going to control just slightly. So if you design for a wind, that's really all I'm looking for. Monument sign design. So this is a typical sign that we may get from a sign manufacturer. It's a pretty picture and it looks great. This particular one does have dimensions on it, so we can kind of calculate certain things. But it's missing a lot of information. It doesn't tell me how it's going to get built. We will not accept this. You know, you're missing all the structural wall sections, like how is this being built? Is this CMU? Is it steel? Is this metal studs? You know, what about the foundation? What is it sitting on? All right, we have to have all that information. And again, because all that is what has to be designed for that wind speed. If you think about this sign, it's 167 inches wide and 71 inches tall. It's basically a sail on a sailboat. It's like a big old kite. So you go onto the beach and you film little kites and you see how the wind takes those. Now imagine that kite that big. This is what people jump out of airplanes with, kites this size, you know, or they go kite surfing. All right, it will lift you up out of the water. All right, so that's what we have to design all these signs for, is those same wind pressures. It's actually more than that. We're designing for the, you know, the 107 or 104. So this is basically what we're looking for. All right, so this is the wall section through that sign. This is I'm looking for just this. So for a solid wall sign, that should be a steel sign. But for this, most times I'd say these are probably going to be CMU. You know, so for the CMU wall, you have to show me the footing. You have to specify how large the footing is. Give me the dimensions. How wide is it? How thick is it? You have to tell me what the reinforcing is in it. You know, what is the rebar? Typically, you're going to have like 3 number 5s or something like that. The footing thickness is usually at least 12 inches deep. All right. Here in Georgia or in the Atlanta area where we live, that footing is required to be a minimum of 12 inches below the finished grade, below the ground. The reason is because that's for frost. We do have winters and it does freeze. If you put that footing up high and it freezes, what happens to water when it freezes? It expands. So all the moisture in the soil is going to expand and it's going to lift that footing right up out of the ground. Literally, it happens all the time. Up in Chicago, they have to bury their stuff like 3 feet in the ground, so that doesn't happen. All right, you don't see it too often, but it can happen. What you'll see is it'll lift up on one side and that sign will start leaning. All right, you have to specify what is the sign made out of. You know, in this particular case, is this a CMU block or is this concrete? Specify what strength of concrete. Are you using 3,000 PSI concrete, 4,000, 5,000 PSI concrete? Also the reinforcing. You know, what is the vertical reinforcing, the vertical rebar in that wall? All right. What is the reinforcing in the footing? What is the horizontal reinforcing? All right, for CMU actually requires horizontal reinforcing every 16 inches. So that's what you see every 16 inches. It's usually called like ladder framing or ladder rebar, ladder reinforcement. It's the same, roughly 3/8 inch or 1/4 inch thick, and actually lays in the joints of those. All right. And at the top of the wall, you typically have a bond beam where you're going to fill it solid. You know, is this filled solid? Are you only filling the cells where the rebar is? These are the types of things that we have to know. We go out and we're going to inspect those. So. Right. So the question was, you know, do we design signs for Breakaway? You could design signs for Breakaway, but typically not, because they would blow over really fast. But that's the reason why we don't allow signs in the right of way. You have to be 10 feet back behind the right of way. So a car would have to jump the curb, go across the sidewalk, miss the telephone pole before it hits your sign. Yeah, they do. But there are a lot of the monument signs are just older signs that were kind of grandfathered in. They were constructed closer to the road or something like that. And those are the ones, or it's a bad turn lane or something like that. Signs do get hit. We understand that. There are drunk drivers. It's raining. You're going too fast. Accidents happen. A car weighs quite a bit, and depending on how well that's built, it may slow down your car, but your car is still going to probably win that. It's going to be a tough match. The other one over here is this is actually for a post. Another type of sign that we see for monument signs is we'll see where people put steel columns. So maybe like in the other picture back here, you may have a steel column on the left-hand side and a steel column on the right-hand side, and they have this prefab sign that they will slide over the columns and attach to it. All right. If you have a steel column, same thing, you have to specify your footing, and you have to specify what size column you have, what grade of steel is it? Is it a tube steel? Is it a pipe? What size is it? You have to specify the anchor bolts. You know, how is that pipe, that column attached to the footing? All right. And all that is calculated based on the wind speed. So you basically take your wind speed as a pound per square foot and you push it, and this wants to try to bend and lean over. And that's why those connection designs are critical, especially for monument signs. Now, wall signs. Wall signs. What's wrong with this picture here? And this is, we see this all the time. It's your cross section of your design of your sign. We have some wonderful renderings, all right, and we see a lot and look like great signs, but again, you're not telling me anything here. In this particular one, it says attachment varies with wall type. That does not tell me how you're going to attach it. You're leaving it up to the contractor to attach it however they want, and I have seen them attach it however they want or don't want. All right, and I've seen signs literally leaning, hanging on by a thread. All right. These signs are designed for the same wind speed. All right. Put in perspective, 100 and plus mile an hour wind is probably going to be around, for components and cladding, 50 pounds per square foot. You know, wind load. But what's happening is because all these signs project out from the building, there's like a hammer, they have a leverage on it. All right. So that you have the bigger the sign and the smaller the raceway, the bigger the leverage arm on it. So you're always better to put your anchors, your bolts further apart. Couple things here is, you know, like what is the existing wall type? We have to know what it is. Is it a metal studded wall? Is it brick wall? Is it stucco? What are you attaching it to? All right. You cannot attach a sign to a brick veneer. It is actually not allowed by code. It's been that way forever. And I know people do it all the time. And I know there's a lot of signs attached to walls. All right. But in general, you cannot attach a sign to the brick veneer. And the reason is because a brick veneer is just that. It's a veneer. It's a facade. It's like attaching it to, you know, if it was built out of paper on the outside, paper mache, you couldn't attach it to the paper mache because it's not structural. All right. Brick is stone. It's masonry. It has a lot of capacity going up and down. All right. It's rock. All right. So I can pile it up 100 feet high, and if I had a perfect load straight on it, it would work just fine. But that's not what we're designing for. I'm designing for that lateral pressure, the in and out movement of what that sign does on that wall. So if you can imagine that wall up and down perfectly straight, but what if I were to 10-foot wall just standing here by itself and I were to push on it? I could very easily push that wall over. All right, if it didn't have any type of straps or brick ties or things like that. That's what happens with signs. All right, I have seen signs come off of buildings before, and that's what we have to design for. So you cannot attach the brick veneer. It has to be attached to the structural framing behind it. You have to specify the type, size, and spacing of the fasteners. So what are we talking about here? This is probably the most common that we see. All right. Normal wall construction is just like this. You have the yellow here is your channel letter. You have your letters, then you have your raceway behind it. That's the yellow. You provide some sort of clip angles coming off of it, and then it's leaned up against the brick. All right. And that's usually where your detail stops. But I need to know more. I need to know, is this brick? Is this stucco? In this particular example, I'm showing it as brick veneer. All right, because this is the most common one that we see. All right, behind that is going to be the metal stud or the wood stud, depending on how old the building is. All right. And what happens is you cannot attach the brick veneer because it can basically rip the veneer off the side of the building. So what you have to do, and also the reality of your holes for your signs aligning perfectly with those studs is probably like 1 in 100. All right, you're not going to hit it. So what do you have to do? So if this is right in between the studs, which are usually 16 inches on the center, maybe you have your hole 8 inches, or maybe it's a different spacing, maybe it's 12 inches on the center. It's not going to line up with every fourth one. So what you have to do, you have to put some sort of blocking behind the stud, called a backing plate. If it's a wood frame construction, you can basically put a 2x4 behind it, 2x6, or you can put a metal angle, a little 2x2 angle, or a piece of unistrut, works really well. You can buy all this at Home Depot, and you have to attach that to the inside of your metal stud so that it's now part of the structure. So basically, you've just enhanced your existing structural, and now you have something continuous that you can attach to, so that your fastening pattern, your bolting pattern, it aligns because now you have something continuous to attach to. Okay, it's a very easy detail. Looks basically like this, but you have to specify exactly what everything is. I need you to specify what this backing material is. How are you fastening it to it? Typically you're going to be fastening it with screws because you can screw into wood and you can screw in to metal studs. All right, so you would say continuous 2x4, fasten to metal stud with number 12 screws with 2 number 12 screws per stud. Yes, ma'am. Yep. So also in that section is minimum sizes of bolts of fasteners required. So for signs, any signs, the minimum fastener requirement is 3/8 inch diameter. So you cannot specify a 1/4 inch diameter bolt. It's not allowed. The minimum size is 3/8 by code. So you just go ahead and change all your details to show a minimum 3/8. And I'll tell you the main reason for that is because although it's just 1/8 inch difference, there's actually a big difference in capacity, and the fact 1/4 inch bolt, when you put it in, or if it's a screw, a fastener, they can shear off fairly easily. 3/8 inch doesn't shear off as easily. And if you already have your clip angle right there and you drill that hole and you put your screw in, you start screwing it in and it shears off, now what? Now you got to put another clip somewhere else, and hopefully you don't hit into something behind the wall that's in the way. So that's why you have larger. Plus, the 3/8 inch is a lot more durable versus 1/4 inch. It doesn't rust as much. So that's the other thing for all your fasteners. All your fasteners have to be non-corrosive, meaning they have to be either stainless steel or they have to be galvanized. All right, or some sort of protective coating. There's a lot of epoxy coatings and things nowadays. So you can possibly do that, but most of the time you're going to either get stainless steel or hot dip galvanized. And again, that's just so that the bolt doesn't rust out. If I design this perfect and I put this just mild steel bolt, well, it's exposed to the weather, it will rust. All right, and another thing that you'll run into also that a lot of people overlook is a lot of times these raceways right here, all this lettering and the box behind it that hides all the electronics, that's aluminum most of the time. All right, sometimes you'll do some powder coated steel or something like that, but a lot of times it's aluminum. All right, problem with bare aluminum and steel is it's called galvanic corrosion. It rusts. Basically, you can make it rust. The aluminum will rust. It'll start pitting out. So that's why it's called dissimilar metals. So you can use stainless steel. Stainless steel is inert. All right, it won't react with the aluminum. Or galvanizing. Galvanizing is a coating of zinc. So hot dip galvanized, that is also a protective coating that works with aluminum. So just by design, because it's special elements, you use stainless steel or hot dip galvanized fasteners, you don't have to worry about it. It will work with aluminum also. Yes, ma'am.
We get an online question from Ellie Nazar. If the store owner wants to for front store inside, do we need 2 sign permits or 1?
2 sign permits. Yes. Yeah, each sign requires its own permit. Yeah, and submit those at the same time, because it's, if you own the corner one, then we'll look into the total allowable square footage for that's allowed for your space, because there's a maximum for corners on what the total square footage is.
So for a commercial business, they require.
Are they required to have a wall sign? No. No, I don't think anybody. Well, you have to have address. Address is required, but I don't know if there's any requirement for people to have wall signs on their building. Not that I'm aware of, unless there's something specifically in our Muni code, but I don't think there is. It's just addressing. So the reason why I'll allow this detail, because what's happening is when the wind hits this, it tries to pull, it tries to rotate. So the top of this sign, tries to pull away, and the bottom sign tries to push up against the wall. And in this very small area, which oftentimes might be 6 inches or 8 inches, it's a very small area, you're twisting the brick right here. Brick does not want to be twisted. It wants to go straight down. Let gravity work for it. If you try to push it in and out or twist it, it will break. It will crack. It will eventually fail. It cracks, water gets in it. Now everything's exposed, the wiring, the fasteners, just things like that. So this is a typical detail. Like I said, that works really well for wall signs. I'm not worried about the vertical load on it, because even when the load comes down the channel ladder, they don't weigh too much. It's in compression on the brick, so I'm not really too worried about it coming up. I'm really more concerned with that sign falling off the building. All right, so that's why we have to attach the structure behind. Does anybody have any questions? All right. So now that you guys know what's required, let's talk about how to apply for a permit. All right, there's 2 ways to do it in the city. You can either go online, you can go to the Village of Sandy Springs portal. All right, it looks like this. I think most people are starting to do that now. There was a time where maybe people were emailing drawings to some of the sign reviewers, but we don't allow email. All right, there's only 2 ways. You can either apply yourself online, or you can apply in person downstairs at City Hall. All right, the advantage of going online is, many things. You can apply for your building permit. You can keep track of it, where it is in the plan review process. You will get your approved plans there, your permit card, everything is signed off for you to download at your disposal. You can request your inspections. We'll go over that in a minute. You can go ahead and pay for your invoice online, everything right there instantly. And the directions are pretty simple. Once you go in there, you apply. You just apply for commercial sign, ground mounted or wall mounted, or whichever one it is. And you just follow the steps. I think there's 7 steps. You just fill in the information and upload your required documents. And we'll go over that in a minute. It's on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We're not. It is mobile device friendly. It works on all web browsers. It does step-by-step data entry for your applications. Especially for signs, because your sign permits are always the same, except an address, essentially, maybe a little bit of description change. You can actually set up a template. All right, and you can have it filled out with your contact information and all that information already ready to go. So all you have to do is just start with your template for your application, and then just fill in the changes or make edits to it. And then you can submit it. So it's a lot quicker to submit it once you save the template. Other nice thing about it, it automatically saves your progress. So if you get to step 5, you don't have to click save. It's remembering what you do. The address for that is build.sandyspringsga.gov. And I'll go back to here. This is the main page for it. Everything that I've talked about today, you can find out here. These bottom 3 squares, but especially these bottom 2 squares, they'll tell you everything you want to know. Bottom left one is our GIS. That'll tell you what you're zoned. Most of you guys are going to be commercial, so you're not going to worry about it. And then development code, everything we talked about, this is a link to the actual development code if you want to actually go in there and read what it says. I think this presentation may be a little bit easier to read than what that does, but nonetheless, it's there. The other way you can do it is you can apply in person. If you do come in person, it is by appointment only. We have a queuing system called Qless, and I think it's spr.gs/CHQ. I'll put that in here in the edit. But that's the link to a website that you can actually sign in for an appointment. We have 20-minute increments throughout the day, every day that we're open, and you can go ahead and make an appointment and they'll see you at that time. Or if you want to just come in, you can come in and we have an iPad down there and you can just, with the Qless system already there, and you can go in there and you can fill out your information and you'll be next available. But I will warn you though, if there's a dozen people in front of you that had appointments, they're probably going to take priority, but we're pretty good. We'll probably get to you pretty quick nonetheless. So what are the submittal requirements? All right. So you have to have the application. So when you apply, you need the application. All right. You have to give us a site plan. Where is the sign going? Especially if it's a monument sign. You know, it has to be shown, or an image of the building facade for wall signs. All right. What we're looking for there is we have to calculate what your allowable square footage is. Right? If you're less than 32 square feet, we know it's going to be 32 square feet. But I need you to show on that elevation that, hey, my space, my rental space is X feet. If it's, say it's 32 feet, then we know you're allowed 30 feet. If it's 50 foot wide, all right, then you're going to get a little bit bigger sign. And we want to know that. So we have to have the least space horizontal dimension so that we can calculate exactly what your allowable sign is. And then likewise, all the dimensions of the signs. Kind of, let's see, you know, before and after, if you're replacing a sign or something like that, or just your rendering, those work great. All the dimensions on it. We need to see your structural details. That's what I talked about today in the building code. I need to see those details. How is it being attached to the wall? How is that monument sign coming up out of the ground? I have to see those details. And honestly, with the size signs that we're doing, I mean, it's probably almost going to be a standard detail. If you get it designed once or have an engineer design it once for you, then probably that sign will work up to a maximum height and the maximum square footage. Yes, sir. Yeah. Yes, that's a great question. So the question was, is there a standard time frame when you apply for a permit and you submit all your documents and when you can get your permit? That depends on the quality of your drawings, basically. Did you give us all this information? Did you give me everything that we talked about today? If you did, and I have a good detail in there with everything specified, I don't want to see something that says per city requirements. That does not work. We don't have city requirements for it. We have building code requirements. All right, so you guys have to do it. If you need help with it, you can hire a structural engineer. They'll do it. We have several sign companies that they hire an engineer all the time, and they just give us their details just like that, and they're good to go. And those usually get, assuming their signs the right size, those get approved right away. The standard review time for signs, what do we have for signs? Was it 5 days? Three to 5 days, 3 days. So 3 days is turnaround time for signs, what we try to do. All right, unless we're busy, and we've gotten pretty busy here lately, it's 3 days. But again, that depends on the quality of what we have. You can theoretically walk into the office and walk out with your permit if you have everything there. Because if you walk in the office, you can set a meeting with the planner of the day. All right. They'll look at your drawing, make sure it meets all the zoning requirements, planning and zoning requirements. And then we can go get our building plan reviewer and they'll look at the structural detail. And as long as everything looks good there, we will be happy to stamp and approve your drawings and you will walk out with your permit right after you pay. So, yes, sir.
Now, for temporary signs.
Yeah. All right, so the question there was for temporary signs, are you required to have basically a sticker on the back of it that shows that sign was approved? The answer is yes. Yeah, right. So if you come in for a temporary sign or banner, what happens is you show us your sign, your rendering, and we know, it's allowed a certain size based on the size of your building or whatever. It's really not much for that. But you'll be issued a sticker. All right. It's basically because we can't stamp your actual sign. So what we're doing is we give you a sticker and that goes in the back of your sign. So that has to remain on there. All right. And they expire because remember, you can only keep your signs up for like 60 days max over a year. So, but you have to have it. So if code enforcement drives around and they see a whole bunch of signs going up and there's no sticker on the back, your sign's going to come down. So just keep that in mind. Then you'll be coming back in saying, I need to get a permit. And we'll go over that in just a minute too. Code enforcement. What is code enforcement? This is the violations and the penalties. This is what happens if you don't do it right. All right, non-compliance. Non-compliance is where no person can erect any sign which does not comply with the development code and the building code. All right. So if you don't meet everything we talked about today, you're in trouble, especially if you went ahead and built it. Existing signs, they'll be grandfathered in. Like if they were already there before the city or whatever, you'll be grandfathered in. But any new sign or replacement sign has to meet all this criteria. Dangerous or defective is just how it sounds. You have a wooden sign and it's just rotted out and it's failing, it's falling, or somebody attached something to the brick veneer with really tiny screws and only put 2 of them in it instead of 10 like it should have had, then it starts pulling away, or maybe they stripped it out when they were installing it. There's all kinds of different scenarios and variables that go into this. Mother Nature plays a huge role in it. She likes to blow on signs. Those have to be taken down, repaired, or replaced. Each sign that's installed, created, or erected, or maintained in violation is a separate violation. All right. So for each problem is a separate violation. So if you have 10 signs, that's 10 violations. Public nuisance is just that. Anything that doesn't meet this criteria, or if it's an old sign or a damaged sign or something like that, it's considered a nuisance and it has to be repaired or replaced at the owner's expense. A notice. So if we find something, you're going to have 10 to 30 days written notice to correct it. All right. If you refuse to correct it, the city can remove it for you and you'll pay for it. We'll send you the bill for it. Or you might get a ticket, which we'll get to in a minute. Double permit fees. If you design a sign or install a sign before you have a permit, if we see that it's being installed, even if you have applied for a permit, you cannot start installing that sign until after your permit was approved and you've been issued a permit card. We see it all the time.
You see it in your end,
You need to contact us. We're working on that. So we're working on that in some future enhancements with the permitting software. We're working on that so that we can kind of come back. So just come by and let us know. It'll be on the application. When we get our new application out, it will ask you. It's like, did you already install this or were you installing it? And you have to sign that. So if you lie about it, then that's also not good. So, but you'll be given a written notice about it. Double permit fee. So like I said, if you start working on it, they're going to give a stop work order and they're going to say you need to come and apply for a permit. All right, they may make you take it back down depending on what the scenarios are. And come in and apply for the permit. And it's gonna be double permit fees. Citations, all right? If you don't follow these rules, or you're a repeat offender, or you just refuse to do something, you can be issued a citation. All right? And you can be issued a citation for every violation. You know, if we told you you need to do something, you didn't, it's a violation for not following an order, and it's a violation for having, you know, an unsightly sign or a public nuisance sign. Those tickets, you have to appear in court. All right, you have to go to court, and each of those tickets can hold up to $1,000 fine and up to 60 days in jail or both. All right, so you got to appear to court and make it right. So it's not worth it. We're definitely going to start cracking down on it because there's a lot of signs. I see a lot of signs. We literally have one where we are literally doing the plan review at our table, look across the street, watching the sign get installed. Literally. So we stopped our plan review, walked across the street, and asked them what were they doing. Well, we're installing our sign. It's like, well, please stop and take it down. And the reason why is because what they were planning on doing was not what they had drawn on their drawing did not match with how you could literally install it. They thought it was going to be CMU and they were going to use expansion anchors on it. And there's nothing there. It was stucco and wood studs. So they actually had to crawl up in it in the access hatch to see what was behind it and then change their design so they can attach appropriately. All right. And I think that one was even ephes, which is just styrofoam. So they were going to attach literally to styrofoam. So that's why we do what we do. That's why we want everything done right. Yes, ma'am. Yes. Yes, that's another good one. So policy for permitting and plan review in general. All right, not specific to signs, but just in general. So your permit fees cover our time to review and our time to go out and do inspections. All right. And they don't cover our time, you know, and what we pay the staff to do all this. So our policy is plan reviews. When we're doing our plan review, I don't expect anybody to get it right the first time. All right. That's what we do, plan review, and we mark it up. We say, hey, you're missing this. For signs, it's usually like, hey, show me your connection detail, you know, show me your rebar, whatever. I expect you to get it the next time. If you submit it again and you still don't show me that, or you just ignore the comment, you know, then you're going to get a $200 resubmittal fee on it. So basically the rule is the first time I don't expect you to get it. After the second time, if you still didn't get it, you're probably going to get a $200 fee on it. You know, that's just the policy because we, at that point, it's kind of like we're wasting our time. We've already told you twice now what needs to be done and you guys aren't doing it. We have some stuff where we go through 6, 7 reviews for something very, very, very simple. Put this note on your plan. Well, that's up to you. I mean, if you take one day, then it'll get back in rotation in one day. If you take 2 weeks or 4 weeks or 6 weeks, it's just going to take you that much longer to get the permit. That's not in our control. I know a lot of people say, well, you guys take forever to get the permits, and we're pretty quick. I mean, 3 days is a pretty quick turnaround. And if you come in the office, we can turn around right there while you wait. So it's usually up to you guys and what you keep giving us back. So like I said, just we're trying really hard. We've started using Bluebeam, which is for PDF. We actually can draw on the drawings exactly and tell you on your drawing what you're missing. So we used to have these narrative comments where it's like, oh, blah, 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 blah. But it's not on your drawing for you to give back to your designer or to your engineer to design for you. So we do it like, you know, the rest of the world does. And we actually redline and mark up your drawings for you and tell you exactly what you're missing, what you need. You know, so it's all in one document that you can just forward to your design team because it's a PDF. So that's a good question. So everything, we only accept PDF. Yeah, so all drawings, every document that you have, your application, your owner authorization, which is another thing, all that is in PDF format. And as far as your drawings go, we want one multi-page PDF. What I mean is I don't want a PDF, one PDF for page one PDF for page two. I just want one PDF that has 3 pages in it or 4 pages. All right. The reason why is it's a lot easier and faster for us to approve those drawings. Otherwise, separate files I gotta like take out, I gotta stamp, and then I open up the next one, take it out and stamp when I can just stamp it once and be done. It's again, it's about timeliness and efficiency. We have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. I think right now we're at over 2,000 permits right now. You know, so we average roughly 4,500 permits, new permits. As far as plan reviews, we're over 6,500 plan reviews. Because they get second try, third try, fourth try. So it's a lot. There's a lot of work that goes into it. And we just ask that we get, we're spending the time on it, that we get the same back. That's all we're asking for. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Yep. So it's a good question. So the question was, what happens if you just don't understand the comments or the questions or whatever? What can you do? All right. So what you can do is you can call us. We're here all the time. You can call us. If you could even schedule a meeting with the planner of the day, which is the planning and zoning team, and they can tell you exactly what you need. Every Thursday we have developer meetings. If you feel like, hey, I want to talk to somebody to figure this out specifically, then you can schedule a developers meeting. So every Thursday we have 20-minute time slots where we will get the entire staff, anybody that you want to talk to, and we can talk about it. Exactly what's wrong. Sometimes people don't understand what the comments are, or maybe they don't realize that, you know, you really need to get a structural engineer for this because maybe on a hill and it's very difficult to design around, or who knows, there's all kinds of variables that pop up. So, but yeah, we're available via email, or like I said, come in just like that Q list. So if you want to come in person, you can actually come in just to ask general questions. You have to come in to apply. You can come in and just chat with somebody. So we're here. We want to help you guys out. Trust me, because if we can get it done the first time, that's ideally our goal. That's why we're having the seminar today, to kind of help everybody so they have a better understanding of what's required. So signs that are not permitted. These signs are not permitted. Y'all know what these signs are called? Prohibited signs. Yeah, wind signs. Typically wind signs. Some people call them flag signs. But these are not allowed. You always see these by the street. Why do you think these are not allowed? Feather banners, you're right. They're not allowed. Same thing when we don't allow balloons. All right. They flutter in the wind. They're very distracting to drivers as they go by. There's been documented cases of accidents when things are like fluttering, you know, the big happy-go-lucky guy, you know, for the car dealerships, you know, things like that. Another thing, even something as simple as this technically is not allowed. I hate to even show this picture, but lost cat attached to it. The problem is, it's, you know, we're probably gonna look the other way about posting one here, but we're not gonna look away. You're not allowed to put anything on a traffic sign. That is illegal in so many ways from a state and a federal point of view, because you're obstructing the traffic sign. All right, you cannot put anything on that. Even signs on telephone poles, technically not allowed. All right. If you put it up, you better take it down before. So, signs that are permitted, yard signs. Yard signs are allowed. Okay, you can put them up on the road. You know, this is like an A-frame sign, or there's other names for it. Just yard signs in general. But again, there are rules for them. You don't have to have a permit, but you can't put them in the right of way. All right, they have to be set back. You can see the sidewalk kind of coming across here, and it's back behind it. And I think, what did it say? It was supposed to be 10 feet behind. the sidewalk or whatever, so technically it should be way back here. So probably closer to this where they're allowed to be. All right, so we're not saying that you can't have these, but you still have to follow the rules on where they go. Is this true, like, you don't have to get a permit for swapping it out? Okay, so if you already have a monument sign and you're just swapping out the panel in this particular one, you don't really need a sign permit for that, as long as you're literally just swapping that out. Now, we've had some people say, well, I'm just swapping this out and I'm changing this column and making it rectangle and square. We've had that literally happen. We're like, yeah, you're kind of changing the rest of the structure there. You know, so they had to get a different permit for that. Yes, ma'am. Well, what would not be permitted? Yeah, so again, like I said, we're here for you, even though it's not technically requiring a permit. Still contact us, let us know you're doing it, and we'll just double check, make sure there may be, you may not know that this sign is already deemed a hazard because it's falling apart. And I'd hate for you to put a brand new sign and something that's about to come down. So, you know, we can coordinate with you on that as well. Yes, everything requires a permit. So the question was, what if your monument sign gets hit by a car? Do you need a permit to repair it? The answer is yes. So the building code, especially this year, made a real clear distinction on what is a repair and what is not a repair, because it was getting taken advantage of in the past. And I think code officials were pretty much tired of that. So a repair is technically this part broke and I'm replacing it. Like if I have a car, my oil's bad, I put new oil in it. Or my belt broke, I put a new belt on. My brake pads are bad, put a new brake. I didn't buy a whole new car, right? That's a repair. I'm repairing a component of something. If you're replacing or rebuilding something, that's a permit. That's a new structure or a renovation or a rehabilitation. All right, you need a permit for that. Because if that sign was totally demolished and blew over, or a hurricane came through and knocked that thing 4 blocks down the road, because it wasn't designed for 107-mile-an-hour wind speed. It was designed for no wind speed. All right, so it got blown over. Well, when you go put that sign back, I'm not going to let you put that sign back with no wind speed requirement. You're going to design it for the current. Yes, ma'am.
Now, online question.
All right.
Michael Paxton, does the agency enforce campaign voting signs? What are the regulations?
Give him the mic. Give him the mic. Go ahead. Yeah. We're gonna get you an answer.
So we do non-discriminatory signage enforcement, which means it doesn't matter what the sign says, if it's in the wrong place, it's prohibited. We take a photo of it showing that it's prohibited in the public right of way, and then we remove it. But we'll save them if they want to come back and pick them up.
Right.
Yeah. All code enforcement saves.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah. So
Non-discriminatory enforcement.
yeah. So campaign signs are allowed. They have to just meet the same size restrictions for everything else. Yes, ma'am. Are there? So the question is, are there certain colors that are not allowed on signs?
So yeah, there is restrictions on colors. Just, you can email me or email P&Z first before you have any questions about certain colors. Because there's a many different ones, but they move neon colors, fashion, light, blinking lights, all those other things. So if you have a question about it, just email it to P@SaintSpringsGA.gov.
Easy for planning and zoning. So just in general, for more code compliance, signs are not allowed in the right of way. How do you calculate the right of way? It's kind of hard because that is site specific. You may have a 50-foot right of way, you may have a 75-foot right of way. Nobody really knows. But just in general, I think as a general rule, just make sure you're behind the sidewalk and the telephone poles in a nutshell. I think if you're kind of behind all that, we're probably going to leave you alone, even though it may not be 10 feet. We're not necessarily going out there with a tape measure and measuring every sign. That's not what we're about. We just want to make sure that it's not in the right of way, that it's not obstructing, drivers as they go by or distracting them. Yes, sir. Yeah. So make sure you're at least 18 inches behind the curb line. And you'll be good with code. So.
Well, it's not predictive. A says keep it 18 inches from the curb line, and B says not in the front line.
Right. And we're going through some code revisions right now where we're going to get some of that stuff clarified. But like I said, we're not here to try to dictate and have a monarchy on what you're allowed to do. We're just trying to make sure that things are in an appropriate area. It's really the bottom line. Signs for commercial signs. Thing to note is you have to have the owner's permission for a sign. So for example, let's say you have a commercial space and there's one, I forget what it's called, but the Kroger's inside the loop. They have metal panels, perforated panels that they want their signs attached to. And so they don't allow you to attach signs to the actual building. They actually gave you a separate structure for you to attach everything to. All right. So you actually have to have permission from the landlord, the leasing agents, or the owner of the building to put a sign in. It's just to verify that, because I don't want to issue a permit for something like that where, I'm going to put my sign right here. And the owner of the building may be like, no, you're not. So you have to have permission from them, authorization, and we have an owner authorization form for you to fill out to just basically say, hey, I agree, they can put the sign like they're showing there. So basically everything you submit to us, give to them, they sign off on it, and we're good to go. We kind of talked about the other things, the notice of violation citations and the size restrictions for temporary signs. Questions? Anybody have any questions? Yes, sir.
So, everything has been referenced to the agency.
Yes.
You referenced it to the
The existing building code? Not necessarily. I mean, the way we look at that is we'll say like all your old signs are pretty much grandfathered in. So we're not going to necessarily go for that. Unless we see, like I said, some problem with the sign itself where it's deficient, in which case I'll go out there. I'm also a structural engineer, and I'll go out there and look at it and I'll make the determination if that sign needs to come down. So if you guys need any assistance with code enforcement, just give me a holler and we'll go look at it.
I apologize for going backwards.
Yep.
But for the attachment detail,
Yes,
code requires a 5-inch bend. Could you elaborate on what that means?
sure. So there, as far as fasteners go, so the code does say you have to use 3/8 inch minimum diameter, and it has to be embedded a minimum of 5 inches. All right. The intent of that is, well, 3/8 inches is just the minimum standard period. But as far as the embedment, the intent of that is really for like solid surface, like concrete or CMU, solid CMU. All right. There are other types of fasteners that you can use. Like if I'm going in, say I have a CMU wall, there are several of these buildings that are CMU. All right. And if you're going to a CMU block, it's a different type of fastener, whether you go into grouted, if it's a solid wall, if it's grouted solid with mortar or grout or concrete, versus if you're just going into the hollow shell of it, because CMU does not have that much capacity because it's very thin wall and it's high strength, which means it's very brittle. So it's going to crack and move a lot more. There's different types of fasteners. You can't just specify an expansion anchor because expansion anchors are horrible for CMU because you have these thin walls and actually you go into the hollow shell, and if it's a 5-inch long bolt, then you expand it out, it's not attaching to anything, it's expanding out into air inside that hollow core of that CMU. So they actually make other ones that are called sleeve anchors, is what you should be using, because the entire sleeve expands out. And that's what'll grab the wall of that. Or there are other anchors called screen anchors. There's basically literally like a little mesh screen that you put in their hole, and then you fill it with epoxy. And when you shove your bolt in it, all the epoxy oozes out, and it basically creates like this butterfly bolt out of epoxy to pull that back through. So the 5-inch requirement is there, but it's intended more for the solid surfaces, like CMU and concrete walls, because you can design a wall, or you can, if say you use screws, say you're attaching directly to, through party board or something like that, where you can attach directly to the studs behind it, because you can locate those. You can go with, to get an equivalent capacity, you can design it, your engineer can design it for more smaller screws or less bigger fasteners. Either one will work. It just has to be designed appropriately. And that's where an engineer can help you guys out with that standard design. Any other questions? Any more online? No?
Yes, we have one online.
Okay.
This is from Andrew Spurgeon.
Okay.
I have a couple of questions. One is the minimum cap height for a street number on a monument or entrance sign still 8 feet high? That's the first question. The second question is, if you are using an enclosed expanded foam monument, Peachtree foam craft, does it still need a foundation even though it's completely encased in the hard coating?
Well, how is that sign supported? Typically, those signs like that, they're installed on some sort of post, because those will slide over the post. So you still need to have the connection details for that. Now, as far as it coming in contact with the ground, I guess that would depend on the manufacturer of the foam. A lot of foams are not closed cell, they're usually an open cell. And even if you have a hard coating on it, or a coating on the outside of it, usually that's just on the facade with the visible portion. The part that's touching the ground is usually the bottom side, and oftentimes that's not covered. It's just the bare foam. So what happens is you can get termites in there, you can get moisture wicking up in there, you can get mold growth and all kinds of things like that. So again, it just really depends on the specific road that you're using. But most of the times I'd say those are usually sitting up on top of some solid surface of brick. Maybe you might design like a brick pedestal for that to sit on, and a couple columns sticking up that you slide that over. I've seen that done a few times. That's just the better design, honestly. And as far as repeat the question for the numbering?
Number one was the minimum cap height for a street number or a monument or entrance sign, still 8 feet high.
Pretty sure that, yeah, I'm pretty sure the numbers are exclusive. Building address numberings, I'm pretty sure are exclusive of the sign requirements.
For addresses, when they have multiple addresses, numbers must be located on the top half of the sign and the minimum 8 inches in height, and be visible from both directions. Okay.
Right. But I think if they sit on top of a sign, they don't count towards your sign area. Right.
No, it doesn't have to.
It just has to be legible. Because if you dial 911 and I want the fire department to come, save me out of my burning building, I want them to come to the right building. So basically what we're talking about. So it's a good idea to have a good 8-inch ladder for them to see from the street. But these are good questions. What else do you guys have? Is that it? All right, guys. Well, if you guys don't have any more questions, I appreciate you guys taking the time this morning to meet with us, and hopefully you learned some stuff. The website that you guys register for, if you navigate to the similar area, I will have all these slides posted online by the end of the day. And hopefully this was being recorded, and I'll have a recording of this as well, so for your use as well. But thank you for coming in, and if you guys have any questions afterwards, feel free to ask. Thanks. Yes, sir.